Hello, everybody. I'm here with Dr. Philippe Douyon, and I've been waiting for this interview for a while because this gentleman is a neurologist. He knows how the brain functions, and in order to create a new you to be the best version of yourself, the mentality, I believe it starts with the mentality. Welcome, Doctor.
Thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to this conversation. It'll be great.
Sure. It's going to be great, no doubt about it.
Yeah.
We're getting 2026 started off on the right track. Now, tell me, Doctor, what is it that brought you to the point now where you're a neurologist? What happened in your past that made you want to get into this line of work and to help people and to make people be the best version of themselves?
Yeah, so for me, it was growing up as a kid, my maternal grandmother, she was like the backbone of the family. So you see those shows, those movies where the entire family gets together for Sunday night dinner. That was us, but we did it on Saturday night. We'd get together at grandma's house, and it was amazing. It was something I looked forward to as a kid every single week. And then she was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease, and all of that went away. And around the same time, I had a younger cousin who was diagnosed with epilepsy, so she was having seizures. And those are two really devastating illnesses for somebody to go through. And they're devastating illnesses for the family to witness. I saw my grandmother just become a shell of who she had been. And while watching both my family members go through this, I thought to myself, man, when the brain works the way that it's supposed to, it's this really powerful organ. And so that was really kind of my first foray into neurology and what got me interested in it.
Question: how should the brain work?
So the brain is incredibly powerful. From our perspective, it is the most complicated thing that we have in our entire solar system. And it is made up of 60 to 100 billion neurons, the primary cell types that we think of in the brain. But then there's trillions of other cells that support the neurons to make sure that they work the way that they're supposed to. And so the way that the brain works is that all these neurons communicate with each other. They form trillions of connections with each other. And they are the backbone, these neurons, these cells, of how we think, how we act, how we move. And so when it's working the way that it's supposed to, we're able to live these really amazing, powerful, fulfilling lives. But what we see so much now today is that we're not taking very good care of our brains, and our brains are starting to deteriorate in ways that impact the way that we go about our life.
Could you define a neuron for me?
Yeah. So a neuron is a cell in the brain. It's what we think of as the primary cell type, the most important cell in the brain. And what makes these neurons so incredibly special compared to other cell types in the brain is that neurons are specifically built to connect with other neurons and communicate with other neurons. So one of the things that I tell people often is every neurological disorder you see, every brain disorder that you see is because there's a breakdown in communication and connection with neurons. So for instance, in somebody that has dementia, they may lose billions of neurons throughout their brain, so they're not able to communicate well with each other. In somebody who's had a stroke, you get a clot that blocks the flow of blood to a particular part of the brain, and that causes neurons in that particular part of the brain to die, and so they can't communicate and connect with each other. And so every neurological disorder, every brain disorder is due to a breakdown in connection and communication. And when we sort of compare that to the way that people act, right? When you see breakdowns in family members, breakdowns with couples, breakdowns between countries that result in war, it's all because of breakdown in communication and connection.
Mhm. Now, what can accelerate the rate of breakdown and what can decelerate the rate of breakdown of those neurons?
Yeah, so we have the ability to control the way our brain evolves. And so the things that we do every single day impacts whether or not we're making new neurons and new connections, or whether we are potentially killing neurons and connections, right? So obviously, if I said, oh, somebody had a brain injury, right? Somebody got hit in the head with a baseball bat, everybody could be like, oh, okay, yeah, they would cause some damage that could potentially kill some brain cells, right? But what about the things that we're eating every day? What about the things that we are drinking every day and the way that that impacts the way these neurons are evolving? What about the physical activity or lack thereof, the sedentary lifestyles? That impacts the way that our neurons are evolving. Even How much sleep are we getting? That impacts the way that our neurons are evolving. So we have the ability to control the way our brains evolve, how healthy our brains are throughout our entire lives based on how we think and how we act.
Now, the evolution of the brain, is our brain the same as it was a couple of million years ago, or has it evolved? Is it more sophisticated? Can we do more things, less things?
Yeah, so early humans had smaller brains. And we believe that the reason that we sort of developed these bigger, more complicated brains with a lot more neurons is because early humans had to walk a lot, right? They had to walk for food or run for food. They had to chase down their prey. They had to avoid predators, right? They had to move to different climates. And that caused this process of encephalization where their brains had to get much bigger and needed a lot more cells. And what we see today is even though we have these bigger, more complicated brains, often when we're living sedentary lifestyles, it causes the brain to shrink. And so movement is really key in making sure that our brains are really healthy.
You mentioned the word, I believe it was encephalization.
Hmm.
Can you give me just
Yep.
a quick definition of that?
Yeah, it's just the process in which our brains got bigger over a period of time, got more complicated, developed more cells
Mhm.
throughout our evolutionary history.
Now, I'm assuming that throughout evolutionary history, we had fresher food and people were moving more.
Yep,
And now we seem to be in an environment where people are eating a lot of ultra processed food and we're
yep,
not moving as much.
that's
And
right.
that is actually shrinking the brain.
Absolutely. Right. So people think that exercise is made for your body, right? So that way you could look a certain way, you could put on all these muscles. Well, exercise is really made for the brain. Exercise is the biggest promoter of neuroplasticity. That is your brain's ability to make new neurons and new connections. That's your brain's ability to heal, to adapt, and to learn, right? If you're not exercising, you can't do any of those things. And in fact, like I said, people who live sedentary lifestyles, we see that their brains get smaller, but people who live sedentary lifestyles are at high risk of developing dementia. And when it comes to the way that we eat, I think we've all forgotten what the real purpose of food is, or maybe we haven't learned what the real purpose of food is. Food is there in order to give us the energy to go throughout our day. Food is there to help us to heal, right? Food is there to help us to prevent illness. But the way that we eat today, ultra processed foods, constantly eating. We've been fed this idea that we need to eat 3 meals a day, that's not the way that the brain and body were designed. That stuff, the way that we eat, is making us really sick today.
Is there any type of diet that you think is the best, or what are the inferior type diets?
Yeah. For me, I think you want to stay as natural as possible, right? So you mentioned that we eat a lot of ultra processed foods, which is really hard for the body to break down. And so when we're eating these ultra processed foods and now your body has to try to break it down, it causes cells in our gut to tear apart trying to break these things down. Our body's a machine, and the more you overwork it, the more likely it is that it's going to break down. And when these cells are tearing themselves apart to try to break down this food, what ends up happening is that you cause a lot of inflammation. And that inflammation doesn't just stay in your gut. That inflammation travels everywhere in your body, including in your brain. And so I remember I was taking care of this patient. She was in her 30s. Let's say her name was Jessica. And Jessica had epilepsy her entire life. Horrible seizures from the time that she was a kid. By the time she saw me, she was on 7 different anti-seizure medications and had had 2 brain surgeries to try to cure her seizures, but she kept on seizing. I got Jessica to a place where she was seizure free for 6 months, no seizures for 6 months. And you know the way that I did it? All I did was take soda out of her diet. That's all I did. No other big change, right? And then all of a sudden she ended up back in the ER with a seizure. And so I'm like, Jessica, what's going on? And she says to me, you will never take soda out of my diet again. And she had two 1 liter bottles of Pepsi at her bedside, right? And maybe she wasn't ready to make the change, that got her to a place that she was seizure free, or maybe she just wasn't ready to be seizure free because there are sometimes benefits to having a chronic illness. But I really think it illustrates the point that a lot of times it's we don't need to make big changes. One small change can get our bodies and our brains as healthy as we want them to be.
Are you, in this particular case, are you identifying that the sugar in the soda was a problem or maybe some other chemical in the soda?
Yeah, it was probably a combination of the amount of sugar and the caffeine. So two things that we see that can potentially cause seizures in anybody. And in fact, oftentimes people who have really bad epilepsy, especially kids who have really bad epilepsy, we will overhaul their diet and essentially put them on a ketogenic diet where we're completely, for the most part, cutting out the carbs from their diet. So that way their body's not breaking down those carbohydrates into simple sugars, right? And one of the other things that we see, caffeine, those caffeinated drinks, those energy drinks can cause seizures in anybody, even in people who don't have a history of epilepsy. So the things that we put into our body are incredibly important when it comes to our overall health, but especially our brain health.
Regarding the gut-brain connection and inflammation, what's
Yeah.
the best type of food that your gut bacteria needs?
Oh, it's going to be fruits and vegetables. Right? Fruits,
Why is that?
it's much easier for your body to break down, right? Um, Basically, it can kind of go through you. Your intestines will absorb all the nutrients and get rid of whatever else it doesn't need. It minimizes the risk of inflammation in the gut, and it helps to maintain this really healthy balance between what we consider good bacteria and bad bacteria. The reality is that we are much more bacteria than we are human, right? We are much more bacteria and viruses than we are human. We've got probably trillions of bacteria and viruses all over our skin and inside our intestines. And you want to maintain that balance. And when you're eating poorly, when you're causing essentially leaky gut syndrome by causing all these cells to tear apart and they're leaking their contents and they're causing inflammation throughout, well, now you've tipped the balance over. So instead of this good bacteria, you have a lot more bad bacteria that can cause a bunch of problems.
Mm. Regarding leaky gut, I've heard
Mhm.
this term a million times. What is
Yep.
it that actually leaks into the gut that's so dangerous?
Yeah. So when you sit here and you are essentially your gut, your intestines are trying to break down this food that's ultra processed, and as a result, cells are being torn apart. It's the cell content now that is leaking out. And so your body is trying to repair itself, and your body activates an immune response, which short term is a good thing. But long term, the immune response is not good because the immune response is essentially an inflammatory response, right? It's like if you got bit by a mosquito, you get an inflammatory response. Your skin gets bumpy and red, right? And that's your body trying to fight whatever that mosquito sort of deposited. Uh, and then it goes away after a few days. But if the inflammation is there for an extended period of time, it starts to break down even healthy cells. And then that causes even bigger problems. That inflammatory response, the content of those cells, sometimes, food that's not digested well or food waste, that stuff can seep into your bloodstream and travel all throughout your brain and body and cause autoimmune reactions.
What are some of the common autoimmune reactions that can be caused by it?
So you can see people developing arthritis. You can see people developing lupus. From a neurological perspective, you can see people developing encephalitis, which just means inflammation of the brain. That can cause people to have brain fog. That can cause people to have seizures. That can cause a whole host of issues for people, both short term and long term.
One of the reasons I wanted to have you here on the show is because I joke a lot with all of my friends and even doctors that I don't like doctors. I just don't like
Yeah.
them because
Yeah.
most of them are not in shape. But when I met you, at one point we were in the gym at like 5 or 6 a.m. in the morning.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm like,
Yeah.
this is my type of guy. So I need to really
Yeah.
talk to him. So regarding exercise, what type of exercise do you feel is best, or what amount of exercise do you feel is optimal for brain functioning and overall success?
So I think people need to find a way to exercise every single day, right? Our bodies are made to run, jump, move, dance, do all these things. And at the helm of that, controlling that is our brains. But it's not just that our brains are controlling our movements. Our brains are actually receiving information back from our limbs, our arms, our legs, our bodies as to what's going on. And so it's this beautiful communication, this beautiful connection to keep the whole being really healthy. And at this point, I mean, I think aerobic exercise is great. I think resistance training is really, really important. You need to have a certain amount of muscle on you. At this point, I tell people, look, if you are somebody who loves to dance, find a way to dance 3 or 4 times a week. If you are somebody who has a sport that you love to play, find a way to do that 3 or 4 times a week. Get your body moving. That's incredibly important. Ideally, you want to do it every day. Ideally, it needs to be a combination of things. Like for me, I go to a gym. Like you mentioned, I was at the gym this morning. I had two workouts yesterday, one in the morning, one in the evening. And I play tennis. I recently got into pickleball. I play basketball with my sons. So I do all these things that helps to keep me in shape. And I encourage people to do the same.
As far as exercise is concerned, eating is concerned, I like to instill in my clients like a routine, something they do just automatically without thinking about it. So,
Yeah.
what is your best idea or best advice regarding when you should exercise, maybe time of day? How much should you eat in the morning? Should you exercise in the morning or at night? What's the optimal?
So I tell people exercise first thing in the morning. For me, that's incredibly important. I think no matter what happens the rest of the day, you already feel accomplished, you already feel successful. It also, sets you up for a really great day. I think it's really hard to exercise at the end of the day, especially if you've been working all day. And then now you start thinking to yourself, oh my gosh, I need to try to exercise. And it becomes this stressful thing. And it's a lot easier to miss. I think it's really important to just start your day off by getting your body moving. When it comes to eating, I'm not somebody who believes that you need to eat 3 meals a day. The people that I've seen the healthiest through my life, the people that I've seen live the longest in life are the people who don't eat as much. And so I think at this point for me, I'll eat one big meal per day. I'll have some fruits and some vegetables maybe throughout the day, but I eat one big meal and it tends to be um, in the evening.
Now, most of us in this country, and I'll even include myself, we eat to exhaustion. We eat to the point where
Yeah.
we just can't stuff anything else into the belly. What do you feel is the optimal amount, or should you just be a little hungry after you eat? Should you be satiated? What's best?
No, I think you need to eat until you're about 60 to 70% full. I don't think you're supposed to eat until you are full, and you certainly shouldn't overeat. I think you want to eat until you're about 60 to 70% full. That's going to decrease the amount of inflammation that you have in your body. There are a ton of neurological disorders that are treated ideally with controlling how somebody eats. And in fact, decreasing your calorie intake is associated with increased neuroplasticity. So the less you eat, the more that your brain is going to make new brain cells and new connections amongst those brain cells. So you should not eat to the point that you're full. You certainly should not overeat. You want to eat enough that gives you the energy that you need throughout the day and that keeps your brain and body as healthy as possible.
Do you recommend intermittent fasting?
Absolutely. Fasting, if people fasted, you'd be a lot healthier, right? Because your body's a machine and you need to give it a break. Can you imagine having a car that you just let run 24/7 every single day? Right? We give our cars breaks, right? Like we park them, we turn them off. You need to do the same thing with your body. You need to either set up a fasting schedule for the day. So like I said, I'll eat one big meal a day. Maybe that meal will be at like 7 o'clock. I may not eat again until noon, right? I certainly will be drinking fluids, but I may not have anything else until noon. And that might be like some fruit that I'll have. And, so you can create a schedule where you've got fasting built in to a 24-hour period. Or you could say, look, I'm not going to eat on Sundays. Sundays is my fasting day. Now, you do need to make sure that you're getting plenty of fluids in, but you can build in a fasting day for the week. You can build in fasting days for the month. You could say, look, for the next 72 hours, I'm fasting. Your body and your brain will thank you for it. You'll be that much healthier for it.
For those worried about how much they eat, I know that there's a big issue that people are having now with sugar. We're all talking about there's too much sugar in our lives. And regarding that, I believe the recommendation was maybe 6 teaspoons a day for women, maybe 9 for men. I don't know if that recommendation is still a part of our daily lives or philosophy. But that said, is there too much fruit that you can eat regarding the sugar?
Yeah, I mean, I think you want to be careful. The difference between sort of processed sugar and sugar from fruit is that it doesn't give you, when you're eating sugar from fruit, you don't get the same big spikes in your blood sugar that you get with some of the other processed sugars, which is really important. The fact that you don't get these big spikes means that your body now is not releasing a ton of insulin during those moments. Insulin is the body's biggest growth factor, meaning that insulin is going to make you fat. And not only is insulin going to make you fat, insulin is pro-inflammatory, which means that it's going to cause your body to be inflamed. And so when you're getting these big sugar spikes, then your body releases a ton of insulin, which makes you fatter and makes you more inflamed. As opposed to if you're eating more natural fruit where you don't get these spikes and it's kind of like slowly goes up and then kind of stabilizes and slowly goes down, well, then, you don't get as much insulin that is being pumped out. And so sugar from fruits is much healthier than sugar from processed or processed sugar, but you still want to be careful. The reality is that our early human ancestors, right, they had to work to get their food. They had to work to get their fruits and vegetables, and sugar was not so readily available. And so we're not meant to consume a lot of it. And when you go to the stores now, when you go to the supermarkets, every fruit is always available, regardless of whether or not theoretically it should be in season, which also needs to have you question, well, what are they putting in these fruits and sometimes in these vegetables that allow them to be available all year round because they're not being naturally grown?
Regarding the food that we eat, one of my recommendations for my clients is to eat more fruits, more vegetables, but also to eat more uncooked fruits and vegetables,
Yeah.
completely unprocessed, compared
Mhm.
to cooked food where heat is applied to it. Do you believe that there's an optimal ratio of raw, unprocessed food to cooked food that's ideal for you?
Yeah, I think when you're not feeling well, go raw. Like if you're feeling under the weather, eat
Mhm.
raw fruits and vegetables. Right? Because the reality is that when you heat something, it breaks down the DNA, it damages the DNA, and then that can potentially trigger inflammation in us. So I think ideally, eating these things raw and as close to the source as possible is what's most important.
Mhm.
Like it's rare that I eat like a cooked fruit or vegetable.
It's rare that you eat cooked fruit or vegetable, you say?
Yeah, especially
Oh,
cooked fruit. It's rare. I like in the last year, I could probably count on one hand how many times I've had cooked fruits.
mhm.
Vegetables is
Well,
different, right? You get broccoli, cauliflower, and those things. But
mhm. Well, I'm
yeah,
thinking of apple pie,
yeah, I don't
things
eat
that,
apple pie.
okay, okay.
I don't eat that.
Neither do I.
It's funny that you mentioned that too, because my spouse recently made this caramelized apple that would go in an apple pie, but it wasn't in the pie itself. And she made it and it was absolutely delicious. I was like, but I've never had it before. So yeah.
Okay. In your practice,
Yeah.
what do you think are the most common things that hold people back from really being their true selves, from really, having identity integrity?
Yeah.
And how does that affect the brain?
So one, I think people have limiting beliefs, right? They have limiting beliefs about who they are and what is possible for them. I tell people all the time that Our thoughts are so incredibly powerful that the moment that you are born, people are fighting to control the way that you think. First, it's our parents, then it's our school teachers and classmates. As we get older, it becomes, bosses and colleagues in society at large. And it really shrinks people, right? Because people then start to think like, oh, this is the way that I'm supposed to think, this is the way that I'm supposed to act, and there's no room for anything else. And it's incredibly limiting. And so I think, you know, one, you've got to take charge of your brain and control your own thinking.
So
You have
how
to,
do you take charge of it? What do you do?
so I think it's really important to read books, right? I think it's really important to surround yourself with people who are where you want to go in life. The reality is that the people that we surround ourselves with impacts the way that our brains evolve. We have these neurons, these cells called mirror neurons, a specialized type of neurons. That's, the thinking is that it's there to emphasize some sort of empathy. So if I scratch my nose, you're more likely to scratch your nose. But what we've realized is that the people you surround yourself with, you start to, your neurons start to operate at the same frequency as their neurons, meaning that you start to think like them and you start to act like them. So if you're hanging out with five bad guys, you're going to be the sixth. If you're hanging out with five guys that are doing great things in the world and that are successful, you're going to be the sixth, right? You can always look at somebody's circle and tell who they're going to be in the future because their brains are going to start operating like the brains of the people that they surround themselves with. Exercise is incredibly important. Not only is exercise, I said earlier, it's made for the brain. It is the best anti-anxiety, antidepressant treatment we have by far. It's better than any drugs. It's better than any, kind of therapies that they want to do out there. Get your body moving. And in fact, for me, there was a moment in my life where I was feeling really down and depressed. And doctors, we treat ourselves very differently than we treat patients because, I'm not going to sue myself. And so I hired a personal trainer. I hired a personal trainer to hold me accountable so that way I was in the gym for 5 times a week training with this person. And that's how I handled how I was feeling at the time. And so taking charge of your brain is really about controlling your thinking, controlling your movement, who are you around, and what content you are feeding yourself, whether that is in books, on TV, on social media. All of that impacts the way that your brain evolves.
I'll give you a scenario. I have a client
Mhm.
who wants to change his eating habits. He's had some health concerns, uh, had a stroke.
Mhm.
I know I have another client who had a heart attack. They want to make change. They want to make it right now, but there's some
Yeah.
resistance from family members. They may
Mm.
have a spouse who isn't on the exact same page, and they have kids who want to bring all this ultra processed food into the house and all types of other things. What
Yeah.
type of advice would you give that person in order to break free from that type of lifestyle when it's part of their family?
Yeah. Surround yourself when you people, right? It's,
Can
well,
we,
it's
can
funny
you, are you
because
saying get a new wife and get new kids?
Sometimes you might have to, but it's funny you say that because so not that long ago, I'm in the hospital seeing a patient. She comes in for a stroke and she walked into the hospital. She was not on any medications. Now they're getting ready to discharge her. She's leaving on 9 different medications for, the stroke, for high blood pressure. She's got lung issues. She's got a whole bunch of issues. And so I'm going to her room and I see the primary care doctor, maybe the pulmonologist, the lung doctor, and the nurse all outside talking about this patient and what we should do for her. And so I said, every problem she's currently having is because she is obese, she's overweight, she does not exercise, and she eats like crap. So why don't we tell her you need to eat healthier, you need to exercise, and you need to lose 100 pounds? And they said to me, well, she could go online and give us a bad review. I was like, whatever. I'm going to go and tell this woman that she needs to lose weight. So I go in the room and I say, look, we need you to get as fit as possible. This is what's causing all of your issues. And you're going to do that by doing these things, exercising and eating healthy and all that stuff. And so she's there with her 2 daughters. and her two daughters say, yeah, we're going to do it with you, mom. But the problem is, I know that this is not going to work out well because the two daughters are just as morbidly obese as she is, right? Three morbidly obese people are not going to get that fit. Now, she got herself into a group where there were people that were fit and that they were pushing each other to get as fit as possible. She would do incredibly well. And so sometimes you do need to put yourself in a new environment to get the outcome that you want. And sometimes it doesn't mean that you have to get rid of your family, right? But it does mean that, hey, maybe every day I'm doing this workout class, right? Every day I'm working out with this trainer that does group, training, group workouts for people. So get yourself in an environment that's going to promote the health, the lifestyle that you want.
Regarding your environment and your home environment, do you believe there is an optimal way to set up your home for success and for optimal brain health?
Oh, absolutely. I think one, you've got to make sure you've got healthy foods in your fridge. I think that you want to make sure that you're getting a lot of sunlight, natural sunlight into your home. The vitamin D that we get from natural sunlight is crucial to our overall health. In fact, our greatest source of nourishment comes from the sun. It does not mean that you go when you stand out in the sun and sunbathe when the sun is the hottest, right? But if you could go outside, get that first morning light from the sun for a couple of hours, that's going to be incredibly important. The reality is everybody around across this country is vitamin D deficient. It puts them at risk for depression and anxiety. It puts them at risk for uh, dementia. And the reason why everybody's so vitamin D deficient is because, right, you have parts of the country where you've got winter for 6 months out of the year, it's fairly cold and you're not getting enough sun. And then even for the parts of the country where they have warm weather, well, people are putting on sunblock, people are staying out of the sun because they feel like it might be too hot out. So everybody's vitamin D deficient, not realizing that that is our greatest source of nourishment, getting some natural sunlight. So I think you do need natural sunlight getting into your home. I think that when the evening starts to come about, you've got to decrease now. You've got to turn off some of the artificial lights in your home, right? A lot of people complain that they're not getting enough sleep, but they have all the lights on in their homes. They have all the electronics on in their home. And naturally, based on our body's internal clock, when the evening starts to turn around, our body starts to secrete melatonin. Our brain starts to secrete melatonin, which is the chemical signal that, hey, it is time to go to sleep. But if you got all the electronics on, if you got the TVs on, if you got the lights on, it interferes with that process. And so it makes it much harder to get to sleep. So I think there are things that you can certainly do in your home to set you up for really good physical and also brain health.
Regarding sleep, sometimes I just find it impossible to get 7, 8 hours of sleep. It just doesn't
Yeah.
happen. And then when I do have the time to get that amount of sleep, I just wake up.
Yeah.
If you don't get consecutive 7 to 8 hours of sleep, is it okay to maybe take naps during the day? Does that
Oh, you
help?
should definitely take naps during the day. Everybody should take naps during the day. The reality is that, again, sleep is made for your brain. People think that your brain shuts off when you go to sleep. Not at all. Your brain is active when you go to sleep. Your brain is active, clearing out the toxins that have been built up throughout the day in your brain. Your brain is active, taking what you've learned throughout the day and turning it into memory. And if you're not getting enough sleep, well, you're not going to be able to remember things. You're increasing your risk of dementia as well. We see people have seizures because they're not getting enough sleep. They have brain fog because they're not getting enough sleep. They have cognitive decline because they're not getting enough sleep. And so you've got to find ways to improve your sleep and get your brain and body ready for sleep in the evenings and take naps throughout the day. There are other countries that, it's their priority to take naps throughout the day, right? Like it is built in to their society. And so it's really crucial that we do take naps because the people who are sleep deprived in their 20s, 30s, 40s, and 50s are more likely to develop dementia in their 60s, 70s, and 80s.
Mm. What are your recommendations, if you have any, on meditation?
Oh, meditation is crucial. Your brain does not see a difference between meditating and prayer, but we can tell the brain of somebody who meditates or prays 15 to 20 minutes a day looks different than the brain of somebody who doesn't. The brain of somebody who meditates 15 to 20 minutes a day has more neurons, right? Their brain is healthier. And so it's incredibly important that you find ways to do that because it minimizes the stress and it minimizes the stress hormones like cortisol. And too much cortisol actually kills neurons, kills brain cells. And so meditating is a really powerful way to help keep your brain healthy.
Hmm. Regarding the clients that come to you, doctor, what
Mhm.
are the maybe three or four most common reasons that they do come to
So some people come to me because they want to take their businesses to a different level, and there's a lot of limiting sort of beliefs around that, but also they're living lifestyles that are not conducive to them taking their business to the next level. So I took care of this very successful businessman who ended up losing everything, his business, his wife, and his kids because of alcohol. And you would never consider him an alcoholic. He was just taking his clients out for dinner and then they would have drinks and, so he would consider himself like a moderate drinker, whatever that means. But the alcohol changed his brain. It was causing him to have seizures. It was causing him to not be able to think properly, not be able to make good business decisions, right? And so he ended up losing everything. And we had to work not only to help him get his health back and stay away from this toxin that was killing his brain, killing his potential, and just killed his life. But now we also had to work on some of the limiting beliefs that he had and what he could overcome and accomplish, and how to get through the challenges that he was facing.
you?
There are people who come to me for health reasons, right? So they're whatever health issues that they're having, and maybe they are not happy with the Western medical system, and they're looking for other ways to get healthy. And again, you know, oftentimes disease starts in the brain. And I'm not talking about like brain disease, I'm talking about diseases throughout your body, it starts in the way that you think. It starts in your mindset, right? So a lot of people will say, oh, this runs in my family. High blood pressure runs in my family. Diabetes runs in my family. Well, the process is nobody runs in your family, right? And as a result, you don't run outside. You don't exercise. You don't eat healthy. Your relationship to food is really unhealthy. And that's what's causing this high blood pressure and this diabetes. And so it's about getting them to look at food differently, exercise differently, um, just what their bodies are capable of in different ways, right? So those are oftentimes the people that come to me, as well as people and things like anxiety, depression. I mean, I've helped a couple who couldn't have kids, they were struggling to have a baby, right? And after working with me, now they've got two beautiful little babies. So it's really about just helping people overcome what the challenges are that they're facing in their life.
Okay, doctor, I think that's all the questions I could think of. But I have a request of you. It's a new year. Everyone's making
Yep.
resolutions.
Yep.
What are your top three recommendations to create a new year and make this the best year of your life?
Yeah. So certainly get into the best shape possible, right? Have new experiences. Being a creature of habit is killing your brain. New experiences help to keep your brain really young and healthy. And go out and have fun. Enjoy your life. I think a lot of people live these really stressed out, miserable lives, and that causes their brains to also shrink. That puts them at risk for all these different brain disorders, as well as causes their bodies to break down. Go out and just have some fun. Enjoy and have fun without any toxic substances.
You know what? I'll take that back. I do have another question.
Yeah.
How important is laughter in you?
Oh, laughter is really important. And it doesn't even have to be a genuine laughter. If you are having a tough moment, just smiling, like a fake smile, will help to release a lot of the stress hormones like cortisol and release some of the good feeling hormones like dopamine and serotonin. Oftentimes, when I'm examining a patient, one of the things that I ask is, can you smile? And I ask, can you smile? Because I want to make sure that both sides of their face are symmetric, especially if I'm evaluating them for a stroke. Usually, I get two types of responses. I ask them to smile, and the person breaks out in laughter, and you could just see their entire body relax. The second response that I often get is, I don't smile. That person is miserable. That person's blood pressure is through the roof. That person's got uncontrolled diabetes. That person has a whole bunch of health and physical health and mental health issues. Smiling, laughing cures all. And there's anecdotal evidence that people who have gotten diagnosed with like the worst kinds of cancers, right, make a decision that they're going to go and watch comedy shows for the next 2 weeks and just laugh. And then when they come back to their doctor, their tumors have shrunk. That's how powerful laughter is.
All right. So, as a recommendation, as a doctor, are you
Yep.
saying the best drugs are exercise and laughter?
Exercise, eating healthy, laughter, having a good time, getting enough sleep. Let's say if people did those things, 50% of us doctors would be out of work. And yet, there's a shortage of doctors and nurses that's only expected to get worse by 2030.
Definitely. One last question. I promise this is the last
Yep.
one. I know
Mhm.
you have an online course and you also, I guess, treat patients in person and on video.
Yep.
Tell us a little bit about the online course and what value that provides for your clients or people who sign up for it.
Yeah, so this course actually allows people to transform their thinking. And as a result, they're able to transform their lives. So it allows people to figure out what is the vision that I have for my life? What purpose do I want for my life? And to go out and chase that. It allows them to realize that they've got this powerful tool within their skull and how to use it so that way they're able to create the health, the businesses, the relationships, and the overall life that they want for themselves.
Well, thank you very much, Doctor. I really appreciate your time. And tell us, how can we get in contact with you? Are you on social media, email list? What do you have?
Yeah, so I'm on Instagram. My handle is Philippe.md, so PHILIPPE.md. You can find me on LinkedIn as Dr. Philippe Douyon, on Facebook, on TikTok, it's all the same. And you can email me at philippedouyon@gmail.com, as well as visit my website, drphilippedouyon.com.
Thank you, Doctor, so much. I really appreciate your time. You've been very generous with that. And because of your recommendations and insight, we're going to have a great 2026. I know.
Sounds good. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.